I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Pigskin Podcast Network. You can find them at PigskinPodNet on Twitter, or search the hashtag TPPN. And before you guys continue listening to this episode, pause really quick, give us a rate and review. We would really appreciate it on any of your favorite podcasting apps. It is Monday, July 18th, and we've got nothing really newsworthy. So, gentlemen, how was your weekend? How has your Monday been going?
We had a hell of a rainstorm this weekend. Luckily, it happened on Sunday because Friday and Saturday I was reliving my hair metal youth. I went and saw Stephen Piercy of Brat, Faster Pussycat, LA Guns, Tom Kiefer of Cinderella, rocking it out over Theo Picktown Palooza, and I had a hell of a time. And then we also were getting the boys ready for their 4-H state fair programs, where they were 2 of 4 people voted as, they were their 4-H county fair projects done, and they were 2 of 4 people at the Franklin County Fair that were voted as state fair alternates. So both of them killed their projects. One, the older one did an automotive project, and the 11-year-old built a 4-H math game with a little carrying case where he got to use a router and a nail gun and a chop saw. It was all very cool. I'm very proud of both boys.
Meanwhile, I did work and then tried to squeeze in some naps in between work.
Yeah, I did a whole lot of nothing, so I was...
Dennis did enough for all 3 of us, I think.
Well, and then my Devy draft started, my first ever rookie Devy draft, and I had 3 first-round rookie picks. I took over an orphan. I'm very new to Devy. I'll be honest. I don't feel like I have any idea what I'm doing. And so when it comes to Devy, my team is kind of Big Ten heavy. So the team I took over already had Bijan Robinson, whom I'm aware of, and Caleb Williams, whom I'm aware of, and Sean Tucker, whom I became aware of. So I felt like I was in pretty good shape with that group there. I ended up, I felt like I needed to get the pipeline filled with my quarterback position, and I had the 101 or 104, 107, and one. The 104 and 107 Devy picks. And I ended up trading my 110 rookie pick in Caleb Williams to the guy that had the 101 Devy pick so I could draft CJ Stroud. I get it. I'm a homer because I then drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. with my 104. It is what it is. I'll put those jerseys up behind me here shortly.
Sorry. Someone with, I don't even know who this is. Someone with the Twins organization just retweeted the show asking how we got Sean McVay on there. He got like 15K followers, so I'll take any pub we can get. Anyways, we are talking about the NFC North today. We've got the Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings, and we're going to start with the Packers. who finished last year with a 13-4 record and lost in the divisional round. Their key departures: Davante Adams traded to the Raiders, Marquez Valdez-Scantling goes to the Chiefs, and Zadarius Smith to the Vikings. They added Sammy Watkins, and in the draft, they added 2 key wide receivers in Christian Watson out of North Dakota State and Romeo Doubs out of Nevada. Matt, obviously the big question this offseason and going into this year for the Packers is going to be what is going to happen with Rodgers with no more Davante Adams. Do we think Rodgers will be able to continue to perform where he has the past couple years? And is Allen Lazard the easy just step-up replacement for Adams now that he is gone?
Well, Allen Lazard is probably the best option at wide receiver right now, but if you're talking about replacing Davante Adams, probably not. I think it's going to be more of a committee. We've seen Sammy Watkins at times contribute places. We saw Randall Cobb contribute some last year. Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, they're saying nice things about them. Hopefully they'll be nice contributors. There's still persistent rumors they may go get Will Fuller. We've seen Robert Tonyan add some stuff at times. I wouldn't be surprised if one of their best receivers is actually Aaron Jones. And if we don't see more times where both running backs are on the field and Jones gets slotted out, I think Rodgers is going to be fine, but I don't know if he finishes where he's finished the last couple of years. I dropped him down a little bit. I think Matt LaFleur wants to be able to run the ball a lot anyway. That seemed to be where they've been tracking based on their draft picks of running backs and H-backs and tight ends as skill position players the last few years. And I just Davante Adams is an incredibly special player. Nothing they brought in appears to be Davante Adams at this point in time. I think it's going to be a little bit of a different offense for the Packers.
I mean, you can't even take apart from each of the 4 receivers that the Packers have and put the best part of each one and come up with Davante Adams. Lazard is the highest ranked wide receiver right now. He's going off the board at wide receiver 48 on Sleeper's ADP as of July 13th. But then you got Watson at 53, Sammy Watkins at 75, Romeo Doubs at 95. I'm not even sure where Amari Rodgers is. He wasn't on our list. So
I forgot he was on the team.
The best of them is literally barely going off the board at a wide receiver 4. I do think that it could be problematic for Rodgers. He is going to have to elevate the receivers, and right now Rodgers is coming off at QB 12 after finishing his QB 6 last year. I just don't know if he can lift that many players. It's gonna, we talk about Kansas City and how they're gonna have to spread the ball around this year with Tyreek Hill gone. It's even more so in Green Bay, and I don't have any idea who's going to be the lottery ticket each week. It's going to be a gamble.
I know it does seem like Allen Lazard, at least for most of the community, has just kind of been propped up as the guy who's going to step up for Davante Adams. And I do think he will. I think he's a very good wide receiver. We've seen over the past couple seasons, Aaron Rodgers has gone to bat for him multiple times. I do think that matters. We've seen that really matters, the connection he has with that wide receiver. Now, he's not Davante Adams in a skill set or route running way, but if he gets targeted the way Davante Adams did, that may end at the end of the day matter. Or it's not going to it will matter for fantasy because volume matters in fantasy. Volume is king. I don't think he's going to be anywhere near a top 12 wide receiver, where I think that's like the floor for Davante Adams most year, right? The floor, I would say top floor is top 5, but whatever. You want to go top 12 is the floor for Adams. But I do think he can finish as like a wide receiver 15 to 20, which is massive value from where you're getting him at right now, wide receiver 48. And I think a lot of people they don't know what to think. This is a very weird year. Typically, we go in and we think Green Bay is going to be competing for the division. You got Aaron Rodgers, you've got Davante Adams, you've got Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, good defense. Like, this is going to be a good team. It just feels like a really weird year for the Green Bay Packers, but I am still in on Lazard. Outside of him, at least for this year, there's nobody else I want. Like if you're talking redraft, I've seen it too much with Sammy Watkins. I don't want anything to do with him. I'm sure he's going to have a couple games. I would be fine taking him in the late rounds in a best ball draft. Where was it? He's going off the board as like wide receiver near 75. I'm fine with that because he's probably going to win you a couple weeks in best ball. He's going to get you 2 or 3 probably weeks of really high end scoring, probably put your team over the top again at wide receiver 75. I'm really intrigued to see what Tanyan can do in this offense. Now, he tore his ACL late, but he was very good for 1 year and was getting targeted heavily before he got hurt. I wonder if he can come back and then kind of still be the same thing for this offense, him and Lazard. He is a tight end that I would also be willing to take a bet on. Tight end 20, because if he has those touchdowns and is targeted in the red zone that year that he was, I think he jumped up to like tight end 8 that season, he's going to be a guy who can clearly outproduce his ADP. But like outside of those two, I really don't want any of the other guys on this offense. I will say, or I'm sorry, the receiving core, Romeo Doubs does intrigue me in dynasty leagues. Not this year, but in dynasty leagues, I do think he can be Marquez Valdez-Scantling, but with better hands. And so I'm now granted, this is assuming Rodgers stays in place for a couple more years, but I think he's actually going to be the rookie for this team, not Christian Watson, even though they took Christian Watson earlier. Do either one of you guys have any preference on the rookies for dynasty? Again, assuming Aaron Rodgers sticks around for a couple more years.
I've drafted a couple shares of Watson just because of where I was in the draft, and I didn't like anybody else better, and I couldn't get a deal done to move back. And I've drafted a couple shares of Romeo Doubs later, and I felt much better about them. But I don't know that we're counting on. We're hoping, we're not relying on them to develop. We're hoping one of them does. I did find on Sleeper's ADP, Randall Cobb is going at wide receiver 97 and Amari Rodgers at wide receiver 101. Now, that's 6 of them. I expect probably one of them isn't going to make the team. But I don't know. I'm not sure wide receiver breaks 100 targets this year.
I mean, they might keep all those receivers just because you don't know, because they're going to be mixing and matching. And also a few of those guys have had real checkered. Even Lazard has had a checkered history with injuries. I do agree that with where they're going in rookie drafts, I'm more intrigued with Romeo Doubs. I just feel like Christian Watson has steadily risen over this offseason, especially as Green Bay hasn't really done anything. And I've seen him go like middle of the first. I'm just not there. And so Doubs, you're still getting him down deeper. I don't even mind wide receiver 95 for this season if you're going to take a shot on somebody at the end of the bench, because reports have been that he's looked pretty good. And I actually heard the snippet of Aaron Rodgers talking about his receivers on Pat McAfee, and he said some nice things about Christian Watson, but I was more intrigued with the way he went in depth with Romeo Doubs. I'm not buying into Torre because he couldn't even remember that dude's name. He just said, "Oh, and the receiver we got like in the 7th round, he was good too." I was like, "Nope."
Well, that's interesting that he talked up Doubs. I did not see that, but that is again, I do think he's going to end up being the better long-term play there for the receivers. Dennis, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon were both good plays in 2021. Do you think that continues now into 2022?
I think so. I mean, you saw A.J. Dillon's working out. Did you see him truck that mascot at the baseball game?
Yeah, it's a bit unfair. I really actually felt bad for the mascot.
What were they going for with that, by the way? What you're going to just line your mascot up against a professional football player?
That's what seems... Poor mascot. Have you not seen that stuff? Like mascots take each other out all the time.
Is this like a minor league baseball game, or?
Yeah, I think so. It could be that they use Aaron Jones in an Alvin Kamara type of role, and he gets a lot of passing targets. I like both Jones and Dillon. I feel like Dillon takes the lead in the running game this year, probably 225 to 250 carries, and Jones ends up a little, probably 125, 150. But it wouldn't surprise me if Jones leads the team in targets this year, because we've seen we've seen New Orleans do it with Alvin Kamara. We've seen Carolina do it with Christian McCaffrey. Barkley's rookie year, he caught 90 passes. So we've seen teams really feature good pass catching running backs. So I like both of them at their values right now. Aaron Jones in a PPR at running back 13, that's probably good. I think A.J. Dillon at running back 26 is the better value. I feel like Dillon is poised to be top 15.
Yeah, I like them both. I'm maybe not as bullish on Dillon as you. I don't know if he'll see as many carries as you, but when you said you didn't think anyone for the Packers would get 100 targets, I think if I was betting on anyone to get 100 targets, it would be Aaron Jones. I think he's probably the most dynamic offensive playmaker they have left in this offense. Lazard has been a decent receiver at times doing stuff, but you don't really think of him as an incredibly dynamic playmaker. I don't know that they have any incredibly dynamic playmakers in the receiving core, but Aaron Jones is that kind of difference maker, a guy who scored 4 touchdowns in a game, doing it a whole bunch of different ways, and I think he's going to become a focal point of the offense. I like him, and I like Dillon. I think he's shown that he can help shoulder the load. I think his ADP is pretty good. I actually think Aaron Jones might go back to finishing in the top half of the top 10 again, because he'll probably be featured heavily in the red zone. He still was their kind of primary red zone back before. And I think, you know, that's a place, especially that Aaron Rodgers is looking for people he trusts when he's putting the ball out somewhere.
Yeah, I still believe in Aaron Jones as well. And I think you're going to get some value on the RB13 that he's going as. Now, I'm sure some of that is because he's getting on the older side, and I believe the Packers can get out of his contract after this year. So maybe there's some concern about what his long-term, destination may be. Maybe he stays with Green Bay, maybe he moves on somewhere else. But I do think I kind of agree with Matt here on Aaron Jones. He could probably get back up to like RB5, 6, 7, 8 this year, just based on the volume he might see with A.J. Dillon, because of the concerns in the passing game, and they're not afraid to throw him the ball. We've seen that many times, and I wonder how good, if that defense will be as good as it has been. A.J. Dillon, though, I do think is a pretty good value as well at RB26. I don't know if he gets up to RB15, but I do think he will be a RB2, maybe up to like RB 18 to 20, because I do think that he will get a fair amount of rushing yards and he will get some receiving work as well. So I have
a question for you.
Yeah.
So with Dillon going as RB26, directly in front of him, Elijah Mitchell, you taking Mitchell or Dillon?
I'll take
Mitchell.
Mitchell or J.K. Dobbins? Or excuse me, Dillon or J.K. Dobbins?
Dobbins.
Dillon or Josh Jacobs?
Jacobs.
I think I'll take Jacobs too.
Dillon or Travis Etienne?
Oh, Dillon.
Yeah.
Dillon. It's not
Dillon.
Close. Dillon or Antonio Gibson?
Gibson.
Dillon.
Dillon or David Montgomery?
Montgomery.
I
don't care. Dillon, I guess. I don't have a preference on that one.
Those are all the guys going directly in front of him in descending order. So
Travis Etienne's way too high.
Yeah. I mean, it's the camp videos, right? He's been running against air and catching balls, so he's going to have a magnificent season. But we'll talk about that when we get to the Jaguars. Yeah, I do think that he can outproduce that 26, though, as well. And I feel like if you have Aaron Jones, too, you're not going to likely be able to, if you wanted to, back him up as like a handcuff. You're likely not going to be able to, because someone's going to draft Dillon just for his sole fantasy value alone and try and grab him as their RB2. And I would do that as well, just with how good he could be. Aaron Rodgers, I know we all kind of mentioned it there just a little bit. Does anybody think he falls outside the top 12 this year with the concerns about the receiving game and everything?
Yes, I have him at 16 right now.
That's low.
I haven't.
Look at all the pass-friendly offenses and guys that have put. Rodgers doesn't typically give you that rushing upside.
Yeah, but he didn't last year, and he's still a guy. He was QB, whatever Dennis said earlier, 5.
Devontae Adams last year
Yeah.
saw 169 targets, caught 123 passes for 15, 53, and 11 touchdowns. That could be their entire pass offense this year.
So who do you think will finish ahead of him, Derek Carr or Aaron Rodgers?
Carr.
I'd still put Rodgers ahead. He's just too efficient. Like, we've seen him be fantasy relevant even without Devontae Adams because of injuries. Like, I can't. Maybe I trust him too much, but he's just so efficient with his touchdowns and interceptions that I feel like he's still going to find some way to get somebody the ball.
This might also be. It'll be curious to see how we're answering the next question, which is about the over/under, because it might be that I think the Packers are going to take a bigger step back than you do.
So Aaron Rodgers or Trey Lance?
No,
Rodgers.
I refuse to entertain that.
Yeah, I'm so worried about Lance.
Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins?
Cousins.
Rodgers.
Rams offense with
Cousins.
Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, and Irv Smith, plus KJ Osborne. KJ Osborne might be better than any receiver that the Packers have, if we're being honest.
Aaron Rodgers or Trevor Lawrence?
Rodgers.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out who you have ahead of him.
Me?
Matt.
Well, Matt's answered almost everybody but Rodgers so far.
Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts, Matt Stafford, Tom Brady, Kyler Murray, Derek Carr, Tua Tagovailoa, Kirk Cousins, and Matt Ryan.
Okay.
See, I wouldn't have Ryan, Tua, Cousins, Carr. Brady's close for me. Where'd you have Brady at?
Brady's 10.
10, so that's right around the range I'd have him. So that feels fair. Maybe that's also don't believe in some of those offenses the way that you do.
I feel like
wrong, but
Carr could be ahead of him just because if he does what Rodgers did with Devontae Adams, and he's got Waller, and he's got Renfro, I feel like it.
And the scheme.
Yeah, Carr.
Josh McDaniels wants to throw. I don't think Matt LaFleur ever wanted to throw.
And then I think Cousins could be ahead of him because, he's set up with Zimmer gone. I don't know about Tua. As much as I love Tua coming out, I know they gave him a lot of weapons. I just I get a little nervous. Ryan, I just don't know that Ryan has enough weapons to move ahead of him.
The thing that's helped Rodgers a little bit has been incredible efficiency thanks to some pretty big playmakers. I'm not saying Rodgers isn't efficient, but I don't, we just talked about our concerns about that receiving core. If Trevor Lawrence, I'm not that impressed by who the Jaguars signed, but I would take Christian Kirk over anyone that they have in Green Bay right now, unless something substantially changes for Green Bay. I mean, when we did the positional rankings, all of us had trouble thinking Green Bay would be better than 15th in their own conference. I have trouble believing that if you were going by talent alone, they'd be higher than 30 overall.
Well, again, I think a lot of that goes back to we don't know what Lazard is. We don't know that he won't be. And if he is even halfway decent, because all we know is Devontae Adams. If we're all being honest, nobody else has really stepped up on that offense outside of Devontae Adams. If Allen Lazard can just be a decent wide receiver, that's going to give Rodgers someone that he can be efficient with, because we've seen him make guys fantasy relevant that I didn't even know existed and played football. Like, we've seen him be able to make mediocre wide receivers good. So if Lazard is good, I would argue Rodgers has a chance to make him close to great. Again, volume being king. And if he's efficient with Lazard, Lazard's a big dude too. Like, I always think of Lazard and think he's a smaller guy. He's not. He's a big dude. If you get Tanyan back, I think while you don't have that secure, Devontae Adams is when he gets in the red zone, if they get in the red zone 5 times, he's likely open 4 of them. Like Devontae Adams is just that damn good of a route runner. But now he has two possible viable targets in Allen Lazard and Robert Tonyan. Again, when he comes back, because we don't know, he did tear his ACL late. He may not even be back to start the season. But if both those guys are there, it's not the trash can or the trash pile that was there outside of Devontae Adams. Like we saw Lazard step up at times with Devontae Adams and have good games. So I think that's just the biggest fear is we don't really know what Lazard's going to be as the one, which is I do feel like that is a legitimate concern because he was playing opposite of Devontae Adams. You would think getting probably better matchups and everything, where that probably goes away now with him being the one in that offense.
So he played 15 games last year, Lazard did. How many targets do you think he saw without looking?
Oh, I'm sure not many if Devontae Adams got 160 or something, as you said.
73.
He saw 60 targets and caught 40 passes for 513 yards.
Right.
He did manage 8 touchdowns, which boosted him up. But 60 was his career high. I mean, he played 16 games in 2019, only saw 52 targets. Even if he jumped up 30 or 35 targets, he'd still be shy of 100, and I still don't know where that exactly puts him.
So I don't love the vacated targets arguments because there's so many different factors that play into that. But they just lost 160-something, as you guys mentioned,
they
with
lost,
Devontae Adams.
Plus Marquez Valdes-Scantling had 55. I mean, they vacated like 300 targets out of their passing game.
The one thing with that offense that I think is why and again, clearly based on what you just said about the over-under, we're probably very different on what we think the Packers are going to be this year. Why I'm a little bit more bullish on Lazard, I don't expect him to be Devontae Adams, and he's not going to get 160 targets like Devontae Adams did. But you're also not going to get 100-plus targets when Devontae Adams is getting close to 200 every single season. So there is only room to go up in the target area for Lazard because he's going to be now, in my opinion, and I didn't go back and look at this, but I'm sure if you went back and looked at it, every single year, Rodgers probably has one wide receiver that he hyper targets because that's just the kind of quarterback that he is. He's not afraid to fit the ball into tight windows, and he can put that ball almost anywhere he wants on the field. I've said before, and I'll say again, he's the best passer I've ever seen play the game. That includes Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady.
Post Jordy Nelson, he was pretty locked on to one target, but I actually went all the way back and looked. And when he had Nelson, Adams, and Cobb, it was a pretty even distribution.
And I remember that was back, too, when Jordy was in his heyday. I mean, those were the days that you could get Jordy as like a top 10 wide receiver. And I want to say it was probably back when Cobb was pretty good, too, if I'm remembering correctly. So he hasn't had that, though, right? Like, that's what we were just talking with. Devontae Adams, like, his best wide receiver has probably been Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who, I mean, no offense to MVS, is not that great. So I think that's what we're arguing about here, too. Or not arguing, but that's what we're talking about here, right? It's like, if Lazard is even a decent wide receiver, like they have really nobody else behind him, because I don't think either one of those rookies are going to be able to step up. Randall Cobb's in the twilight of his career. I personally don't think Amari Rodgers was that good to begin with. I don't think he's going to be that good now. So they have nobody. So it's going to be a very intriguing thing to see what happens with this offense. I think Lazard can be good enough to keep Rodgers in the top 12. Him paired with Aaron Jones getting receiving work and Robert Tonyan. But that brings us to the big question here. As Matt has already hinted at, he thinks they might take a step back. They won 13 games last season. Their over-under, Matt, is at 11. Can Matt LaFleur and the Packers do it again?
I think they'll have a decent season. I still think they'll make the playoffs, but I have them under. I have them at 10-7.
That's where, if I were picking one loss right now, 10-7 is where I'm at, too. I'm picking the under.
I feel like 11's the number, which sucks. I wish they would have gone 11.5 so that I could take the under. So I'm going to take the over because all it takes is one game here or there. But I really feel like 11 is probably the amount of wins I would give them this season. The Minnesota Vikings finished second in the NFC North last year with an 8-9 record. Their key departures were Tyler Conklin to the Jets and Xavier Smith to the Panthers. They brought in their new head coach, Kevin O'Connell, as Matt mentioned earlier, from the Rams offense. And Zadarius Smith, the linebacker. Their key rookie adds was Ty Chandler, the running back. Dennis, Mike Zimmer is now gone. Will this offense finally cut it loose? If it does, what does this mean for Kirk Cousins and the passing game?
I feel like Kirk is primed for a career year. He's got 3 really good receivers and Irv Smith, Dalvin Cook, who's a good pass-catching back. I don't think Adam Thielen is done by any stretch. KJ Osborne showed he could step up last year. And Justin Jefferson as well, Justin Jefferson. So I feel like it's going to be it wouldn't surprise me if Kirk finishes QB 7 or 8 even. He's primed. It's tough to say, oh, well, he's bringing the Rams offense, or they're bringing, yes, they work there and they're going to incorporate things. Every coach thinks they're smarter than the coach they worked for. So O'Connell's going to try to do some things of his own. And he's got a lot of weapons. I think Dalvin Cook is better than any Rams running back since Todd Gurley before he injured his knee. So they're going to run Dalvin Cook. Now Dalvin Cook also misses a couple games a year, and Alex Madison kind of steps up. If I had to bet, I think this is going to be a career year for Kirk, but I think the primary beneficiaries are going to be the other players outside of Jefferson. I don't think Jefferson drops. I think he kind of stays equal to where he is, but I think the other guys kind of rise up a little bit.
Yeah, I think Cousins has done well there. I don't know if I think he takes a substantial step up. I like him where he is on his ADP. I agree about Justin Jefferson. He's great, but there's not a ton of value there. I think Thielen's probably a little low for where right now he's going as wide receiver 39. I still think, you have low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 potential there. I like Osborne, what he brings. The biggest question for me is Irv Smith. It feels almost like where we were at a few years ago with Hunter Henry, who got drafted onto the Chargers, who had Gates, and he kind of had to split time. And when it was finally going to be his season, he gets injured before it starts. That's what happened to Irv Smith last year. Kyle Rudolph was gone. It's Irv Smith's time. And then he gets injured and knocked out. I think we still don't really know. He was kind of the third guy in that big 3 tight end class with Hawkinson and Fant. We've seen those guys do really well. We'll be curious about Irv Smith. I'm curious how much they're going to try to incorporate the tight end. It didn't seem like the tight end was a huge part of what Minnesota was doing last year. And as we've seen, if they kind of do a Rams system, Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett, when they've been there, have had moments where they've had good games, but they haven't been overall consistent. And I think a lot of people are excited that this is, Irv Smith rolling into a top 12 season. I'm not as sold on that. But I still like the value of Thielen of all those pieces out there, just because wide receiver 39 feels a little low for his potential.
I feel like I'm the opposite of you. Like, I'm all in on Justin Jefferson, and obviously we saw Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods until he got injured. Then Odell, when he came in, both of those guys were fantasy viable for the most part, especially Odell down the back end there. We know Kevin O'Connell's coming from that offense. We expect them to run some kind of offense like that. We've seen all the reports. Justin Jefferson, I believe Dalvin Cook talking about, hey, they're opening the offense up more. It's out of the Stone Age. I don't know. Adam Thielen the past couple of years, I feel like he's just been relegated almost to like a red zone guy. Like, he's gotten a lot of touchdowns. He hasn't done a lot in between the 20s. And I kind of feel like that's going to continue. I think that could be where KJ Osborne maybe steps up. Matt, as you just mentioned, I'm going to go with possibly be the best wide receiver on the Packers. But if that's the case and it's Osborne between the 20s, but then Thielen down in the red zone, I feel like both those two may cannibalize each other a little bit, where Justin Jefferson, we know, is going to be rock solid. I do agree that that's probably a value, though, for Thielen at wide receiver 39. I mean, that does feel low, especially if he gets you 8, 9, 10 touchdowns. He's probably going to vault himself over that 39 spot and bring you back some kind of value. But he's not a guy that I'm actively targeting. I feel like if he falls down and he's like wide receiver 45, 46, I'm like, okay, I'll finally take a shot on him, especially in dynasty leagues, because I feel like he's on his last leg. Like, he's not going to be here much longer. And in redraft, I think I'd rather just take a shot on some younger guys. I'd probably take a shot on KJ Osborne. I don't even know where his ADP is currently at, but I feel like he's a guy who
wide receiver 70.
So, I mean, he's going way behind Thielen. Like, I'd probably just take a shot on him because I do think he's got some big playability. I mean, he was pretty good at times in the fantasy playoffs last year. I started him a couple times down the stretch. Like, I feel like he's a guy with that boom possibility in his game that he's got a better chance to produce than Adam Thielen. I mean, Matt just mentioned it a little bit there, Dennis, on can Irv Smith finally deliver? He's been very, very hyped since coming out as a rookie out of Alabama. Was an offensive guy. Maybe it was just him going into that Minnesota offense. We know that the way they used to use those tight ends, and we kind of think, hey, Irv Smith, he's got this athleticism, good hands. He's finally going to take that step up. Got injured last year. Is he a tight end that you're willing to bet on? I mean, he's going off the board as tight end 17. That's in a very interesting area. When we've talked about guys recently, when we do in the AFC North, a Hayden Hurst who's going behind him, I think I'd rather take. Just talked about Robert Tonyan. I think I'd rather take him over Irv Smith as well. But where do you sit with Irv Smith?
It's a challenge because when you look at the numbers, so KJ Osborne had 82 targets with 9 starts. He played all 17 games. Thielen missed 4 games, and he had 95 targets. And I think Thielen missed a major part of two of those games he started. So where does that leave Irv? So at tight end 17, going off the board at pick 142, that's what, 14th round, late 13th round, mid 14th, somewhere in there. I think that's a good spot to take a shot on a tight end. But if you're picking Irv there, that means you probably didn't grab one of the top 5 tight ends. And so you're looking for 2 tight ends, so maybe you can stream them, or 3 tight ends just to kind of build out your roster. And you're hoping somebody gets hot or establishes some kind of a role. I do think that the possibility is there in this new offense. If they run it like the Rams, then you're going to have 3 wide receivers on the field. And I could see Jefferson with his 160 targets and Dillon with 120 targets and Osborne with 95 targets. And that's going to leave a little bit of room for Irv, but I don't know that he'll deliver on that tight end 17. And, he's only like 6'2", 240. He's not a big tight end. He's a willing blocker, an able blocker, but he's not a great blocker. And so there is some concern that he does leave the field when they know they're running the ball. They bring in one of the bigger tight ends. I'd be a little bit nervous at tight end, but at tight end 17, it's not a huge gamble. You've already you're picking 2 or 3 tight ends if you're there, like I said, or you've drafted one of the more higher end tight ends, and you're just grabbing a fill-in at a backup.
Maybe you take him, Higbee, and Hurst, and you inevitably start the wrong one every week.
That sounds like something I would do in my redraft league. So.
Sounds like something you're preparing to do.
It might be. No, I will definitely pass on Irv Smith. Definitely taking a shot on Hurst this year, as we've talked about, but I am passing on Irv Smith as of now. He's just I think he's at that point where I've got to see it before I believe it. And if I miss out on it, and I'm kind of fine with it. There's other tight ends that I think I'd rather take a shot on at this point. Matt, how do we feel about Dalvin Cook this year? And if you have him, are you picking up Alexander Mattison as a handcuff?
Yeah, I think Madison's proven to be one of the reliable guys where if you have Cook, it's not bad to go back and scoop up Madison. Dennis is right. Cook's great when he's out there, but it seems like he misses a game or two every season, and then you're usually happy that you have Madison. I'm looking forward to Cook having another decent season. He's a three down running back. I think that you guys are right that he fits. If you're looking at that Rams system, he's the best running back to get into that system since they had a Todd Gurley. So he should be pretty solid. I have him easily in the top 10.
Dalvin just signed a contract extension a couple of years ago. They do have an out after the 2022 season. They can get out for about $6.2 million. But I think Madison's contract is up as well. So, do they keep Dalvin around at 14, 15 million a year and then let Goodson or Kene Nwangu step up and be the backup and let Alexander Mattison walk? Or do you think they get out of the Dalvin Cook business after 2022 and maybe re-sign Madison, who's going to be cheaper. I've listened to some guys like John Hansen who say that he thinks the Vikings really like Goodson. I know, Bruning, you weren't terribly sold on him coming out of college, and I'm not a huge fan. I don't roster any shares across 21 dynasty leagues, if that tells you anything.
Yeah, I do not think that Tyler Goodson could handle the full workload. I also would be very surprised if they let.
You don't think he's good, son?
I don't. I think he's decent.
That
but
was bad, son.
Yeah, I don't think he's a guy that could really handle the. Wait a minute, Tyler Goodson, is he with the Minnesota Vikings?
I'm trying to.
Yeah,
I feel like that's. I feel
think
like
Ty
that's wrong.
Chandler's who they.
Ty
Oh,
Chandler
it
is,
Ty
yeah.
Chandler.
Okay, I was about to
Damn
say.
it.
I was trying to think about that for a minute. I was like, I
Messed him
think
up.
Goodson's with the Packers, isn't he? Like that's what I was trying to think over. I was getting very confused there. Yeah, Ty Chandler. Yes.
Oh, it is Chandler. Damn it.
So
right,
I
disregard
do
all that.
pivoting to Ty Chandler. I do think Ty Chandler is a good running back. I will say the same thing though. I don't know that he's not gonna be able to handle a Dalvin Cook type role, but I do think he could be like a 1A, 1B type thing where he could be handling some of the workload and them kind of pair him with someone else, which we've seen a lot of NFL teams go to. So I don't want to say that's a knock on Ty Chandler. What I was going to say is be very surprised if they let Dalvin Cook go and then decide to pay Alexander Madison.
Yeah.
No offense to Alexander Madison, but I feel like we overrate how well he does when Dalvin Cook is out. He's not quite as good.
But they're not going to pay him Dalvin Cook money either.
True, but I don't think that. I think you just hold on to Dalvin Cook at that point, if he's not showing any signs of slowing down, especially if Minnesota is expecting to compete. I just don't know why you're not going to be able to pay Madison $3 million a year. You're going to have to pay him probably close to $6, $7, $8 million. Well, why not just hold on to Dalvin Cook?
But isn't that also kind of why it feels like that's why they drafted Kene Nwangu and Ty Chandler, is because Madison's contract will expire and then they'll have a different kind of handcuff backup.
I don't think any of those guys are good enough to be the starting running backs, though. Like, I think it's one of those things where we see a lot of teams do this. They draft these running backs and hope, right, that one of them could – like, they probably drafted Ty Chandler hoping, like, well, hey, maybe if he shows us something, he can be a starting running back. Does anybody here think Kene – I don't know how to say his last name. We're going to call him Kene. Sure. Can he be the starting running back for the Minnesota Vikings? I don't think so. Like, can he be good for a fill-in role at times? Absolutely. Do I think he's the starting running back for an NFL team? No, I do not. So I think that's the issue. And they're not – if we expect them to be a good team and possibly a playoff team, well, they could probably still draft a running back in the second round. There's a decent enough amount of running backs in the draft. Like, I think pivoting off Dalvin Cook and going to a lesser player is probably not what they do, especially if they do plan on continuing to compete. That's just my opinion. I would continue to hold on to Dalvin Cook. I do expect him to be good this fantasy season, and then we'll see what happens. He has missed games, but it's only been a couple games like every single year outside of the beginning of his career where he had the torn ACL. Like, it's not like he misses 6-7 games every year. It's typically 2 to 3, which is not a massive deal at the end of the day. All right, let's talk. This episode just
to be clear, I didn't mean that they thought Ty Chandler would be the guy. I meant they have Dalvin Cook to be the guy, and they've just drafted backup handcuffs because they're going to let Madison go.
Yeah, that's what I think, too. That's what I was about to ask. So, like, do you guys – you have to take either ors on the Vikings roster next year, Dalvin Cook or Alexander Madison. I think it's easily Cook. I don't think Madison's there.
Take the gooder player.
Yeah, I think.
And then we'll see if Madison gets a chance somewhere else to see what he can be.
Which I wouldn't be surprised. Again, he's shown flashes. I don't think that they would pivot off Cook to go to Madison. I think.
I mean, there's probably looking at the landscape. There's plenty of teams where he actually could be a starter.
Yeah, the turnover at running back after this year could be very intriguing, which I think is why a lot of people are so excited about this 2023 rookie class, because I think there's like one really, really good running back and then a bunch of question marks, but that's just me. I know a lot of people don't necessarily agree with that. It's going to be very intriguing to see what happens this college season if any of those guys can boost their stock up. How do we feel, though, about the Vikings over-under? The team won 8 games last year. We have their over-under sitting at 9 wins. Do they go over, under? And if you have the over, do you also have them making the playoffs, Matt?
I think 9's a really good number. They have a decently tough schedule. I still basically like them. I think they will end up making the playoffs, but I think they're probably a 9 or 10 win team, and they're competing with Green Bay for that. I don't think they finish under 500. So push would be exactly the record I had projected when I went and looked, but I will go a slight over because I think they're more likely to be at 10 than they are at 8.
Yeah, I'm with Matt there. I think if they are going to if they're sitting at 9-7, I feel like, or 9-6, I feel like they'll win. 9-7, I feel like they win that 10th game. I don't know. I think their offense is gonna be I don't know. Substantial is probably too big a word, but it's not going to be just a little better. I think it's going to be better, and that'll help the defense too. So I think I'd give them the 10 to 11 wins there.
I think I'm going to take the slide over. I do think they get to 10. I don't know if they make the playoffs. And the one thing on this offense is they've actually had a pretty good offense the past couple of years. It's been the defense that screwed them, which is, I think, the reason why everybody hated Mike Zimmer so much, because he's supposedly a defensive guy. So I'd be very curious to see if that defense improves at all, to see if that boosts them into the playoffs. But I do expect with the offense with Kevin O'Connell, if he does bring that Rams system, they'll take a step forward as well there. But I feel like those couple last wild card spots are going to be up for grabs for a lot of teams in the NFC, as it's just not as loaded as it seems like the AFC is. All right, that will do it for us today. We will be back next Monday live. We will have a podcast dropping on Friday, but no more live shows for the week, as we are all taking a little bit of time off. So we will see all of your happy faces again here next Monday. What are we going to be talking about? Who's next week?
Sure. Put the person who made the schedule on the spot.
Gotcha,
I'm pretty sure.
Hey, usually you're right, Johnny.
I'm
on
pretty
the spot.
sure
Like,
it's the AFC South. Well, I thought you were prepared. Our next show.
We're talking about.
I'm pretty sure it's the AFC South.
Lions and who am I forgetting? Why am I forgetting?
The Lions and the
NFC North
Bears.
team now, so the
Bears.
Bears.
Lions and Bears. Oh my! And then I was right. It is the AFC South. So it'll be Monday. Next Monday will be the Titans and the Colts.
Oh God, we should have done that show as a record, so we don't have to see our face of disgust as we discuss those teams. Anyways, we will be back.
I'm all about the Colts. They have my hero, Jonathan Taylor. They have my secondary hero, Michael Pittman.
Jonathan Taylor, he's amazing. So we'll be back on.
They have your hero, Frank Reich.
That's my best friend. Friday's episode, podcast only, will be the Lions and the Bears. And we'll be back on Monday to talk about the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans. Everybody have yourselves a great day, and we'll catch you.